All right, now time for the drawing. So before we get into the lighting scenario, one of the first things that we want to establish is the drawing. So whether you guys want to go off of pre-existing drawing that you guys have in mind, or if you want to create something from scratch, I typically like to sketch in something fairly loose, but gives me enough information to kind of start the basis of my design here, or my lighting design. And I'm thinking about kind of like a sci-fi interior slash hangar. And if you guys have any trouble doing the actual drawing aspect of this, feel free to actually use overlays, just like what we did here. You know, you can use an existing photo, drop the opacity, and actually just trace, you know, over it, just purely for the exercise aspect. Now, when you're creating your own design, your own space, just keep in mind, you know, keeping all of the drawing on one layer, just so that we can actually use this as a basis of a footprint. Because that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to create a basic structure, and then start adding in kind of my design here. And what I'm thinking about is drawing a type of vehicle, and I'm thinking maybe something that's more of like a speed form. I don't know if I want to go with more of like a kind of like a singular air unit like vehicle or something here. And notice how relatively simple I'm keeping the object, because I know that I'm going to be rendering this thing. So I'm going to continue drawing the underside of this vehicle. You know, and it can be like a pod racer, it can be something out of Star Wars, or it can be an existing jet fighter. I mean, it's entirely up to you guys how you want to design your environment. Just be mindful of, you know, if you don't know how something looks, be sure to just look at some reference. You know, I mean, that's what reference is good for. It's there to kind of help give us a reminder of how certain things look. I'm going to draw on the wing here. So that's what I'm thinking for the basis of my design here. And I'm thinking that that this object is probably on a like some sort of like ground support. Drawn some perspective lines, just some loose indication of perspective lines here. And then I always like drawing my classic, you know, the pilot. Who's always checking for, you know, he's kind of like the maintenance guy, pilot. Checking to see if there's anything, any last minute checks before this craft has to get kind of launched or deployed. I'm gonna add in some more design lines here. And just adding to the vehicle actually here. Maybe this thing is weaponized. Maybe there's some extra, you know, weapons that actually get attached. So maybe that's what's actually being installed here, along with, you know, fuel and other things like that. So I'm going to draw on the character here, and the character I'm thinking of placing it right here. Right before it's going to go off. And if you guys are drawing pilots and stuff and you don't know what they look like, I mean, feel free, again, use photo reference. I heavily rely on photo reference when I'm drawing like pilots and characters, just because one, they're extremely hard for me to draw, and to draw them accurately, you know. Because drawing from memory, you're only gonna be able to achieve that, you know, from having drawn a lot of them, you know. So, you know, it's always good to kind of use a reference to kind of get the characters in. I know that, like, when I always try to draw characters without reference, they always look like some weird deformed creature or something, when I'm trying to actually draw like a normal human being. It's quite sad. You know, considering like how long I think I've been drawing, I've actually haven't really drawn characters that much. I've always been drawing like environments and robots and stuff like that, but characters are always a hard one for me. It's just such a tricky subject matter, you know? Okay, so we're almost about done with the drawing here. I'm just gonna add a couple of things, like maybe some more boxes. That can be like crates or something like that, but I'm just adding in objects here just to help flush out, you know, more things for me to light in the environment. You know, and it helps kind of sell the scene a little bit more. And when we're actually rendering the environment, a lot of these objects are actually going to come in handy, because it's going to help describe a lot of the forms. Maybe there's a guy here kneeling down, installing one of these guys, or checking up on the maintenance. So maybe one guy here is kneeled down, kind of just checking to see if all the connections here are in place. It sounds like I know exactly what I'm doing, but I don't. I just honestly I just look at, you know, references of, you know, air hangars and stuff like that, just to kind of see like what activities are going on. So don't think I'm like the super airplane, you know, or designer specialist, because I really don't know, you know, all the intricacies of what goes on in here. All right, let's see what's going on here. Okay. So I'm just gonna go ahead and erase some of this stuff out. Oh. Using my flat brush here. Add in some extra last minute details. Some things that I think will help sell the design. And maybe this door latch is open or something. That might be interesting. And maybe this thing is actually kind of an open cockpit of some sort. Maybe this guy uses like a ladder or something to get up here. Oh my gosh, drawing steps is a pain in the ass. If you guys have the time and you guys like drawing steps, you are awesome. But I hate drawing like meticulous details like steps. It's just like I feel like I'm going nowhere, you know? But I know if you spend time on it, it always ends up looking cool for some reason. Like our eyes are attracted to like very familiar things. Okay, so we're almost done here. I'm just thinking maybe add in some wires and stuff. Going over this thing just to kind of give this a little bit more to go off of here. Maybe there's like an extra support bit here on the back. And that's going to be our drawing. Alright, so let's light this guy. I think I'm fairly happy with the block in. And notice how it's not too detailed. It's enough for me to identify the planes, identify kind of like, you know, knowing that, oh hey, this is a cylinder, that's a round sphere, this is a box. You know, there's a ceiling up on top. And so these are just very basic things, you know, footprints, visual footprints for us to kind of base our forms. And then from here, we can start drawing in or start plotting in our light source. Okay, sweet. Okay, so I'm going to save this. This is going to be our interior spaceship hangar. Long title, I know. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make a layer underneath. I'm going to lock this layer here by using this little lock here so that we don't accidentally draw on top of it. And now I'm just going to talk about just some basic things that we've already covered. And for this lighting scenario, I'm actually going to do a top light. So a top light, again, if the sun is up here, I know that it's going to come from the top. And the things that are going to be lit from the top is actually going to be the windshield, the top of the vehicle, this section. And so basically we can start to map out exactly how much of the forms are actually going to be shown and what is going to be in shadow. The top here and the top sliver of this wing, the top of this wing here, the tops of the character and the shoulder, the character's face here, the shoulder, the arm, maybe part of the leg here, the ladder, the underside of this thing. And so we can start to really analyze and break down what's going to be lit in and versus what's going to be in shadow. So, and the ground here is going to be lit too, because the ground, if we look at the orientation of the ground is flat, right? And because the ground is flat, the light source or the sun hitting it, this is going to be really, really bright, right? So we know that that's going to not be in any shadow whatsoever. The only shadow that's going to hit the ground is actually the cast shadow. Okay, that's going to come from the ship, the objects around, and the characters. Okay, so this cast shadow is the only thing that's going to be the shadow on the ground. And if we want to introduce any other shadows, we can say, well, if there's a light source, whether it's a sun or a light, and there's some cast shadow coming from an object from above, then we can make that decision and say, well, there's a big cast shadow that's actually coming above and over this thing. Okay, but we'll make those decisions after we've kind of blocked in the basics here. So these are my red mark notes for top lighting. And let's just do another lighting scenario here. Let's do something that's maybe backlit. So maybe the sun is here, right? And the light's coming in at this angle. So we know for a fact that what's going to be in light is just a sliver, right? Just like how we were looking at some of those images. So if this is going to be the only thing that's going to be in light, we know for a fact that a lot of this side is actually going to be in shadow, right? So this is in shadow, and there's only going to be little slivers of light. These cylinders are going to get light, but check this out. Now we have an interior here, and this interior, based on the angle, we can say, hey, a good chunk of this is actually going to be in shadow, and a section of it is going to be in light. And the cast shadow that's going to come from the ship is actually going to be really big. It's almost going to cover the entire ground here. So we can say that this is going to be the cast shadow. And the characters here, they're going to get a little sliver of light, but for the most part, they're actually going to be in shadow as well. So this is our notes for the backlighting. And I'm going to use these two, I'm going to demonstrate these two lighting scenarios for you guys today. And yeah, let's get started. Alright, so top lighting. Let's do that first. So I'm going to go ahead and start blocking in just some basic lighting principles. Here. Things that I know for a fact are going to be in shadow, I'm blocking in. Like there's this mechanical arm thing here. That's most likely in shadow. And again, before we do the major cast shadows, I just want to individually make sure that the objects are plotted as if, you know, they're being lit from the top. Because otherwise, if we start to think about cast shadows, it's going to get really complex really quickly. So let's just kind of treat everything as an individual object first, and just try to plot out areas that are going to be lit versus areas that are going to be relatively dark. So, you know, a lot of these objects here are probably going to get covered in cast shadow, but I just want to make sure that these elements are following the rules of a top lit surface. Okay, so that's kind of like what I like to do, is just treat everything as if there's no cast shadows just yet, that it's being lit. It's being fairly lit. That way we understand, you know, what's being lit versus what's going to be in shadow, just as an object. And then we have some mechanical stuff that this pilot's fiddling with. And then we got the stairs, right? So the underside of this thing is going to be in shadow. Alright, along with just the stairs here. The underside of these little stairs are going to get shadow, right? Because it's being top lit. And then let's go ahead and do the pilots here. So I'm thinking, okay, well, here's the pilot's arm, some sort of backpack. Backpack's gonna be top lit. We got some pouches and stuff, and then we have the pants. Maybe one leg is in shadow, and the other leg we just see slight indication of you know, creases from the pants itself. And then the shoes. So like this guy's waiting to board, right? And then we have another guy here who's most likely not a pilot, but probably is a supervisor or the guy that's going to give him instructions on what to do when flying this thing. So maybe he has some sort of device or something. Maybe it's a coat or something, but we're going to put some shadow on the legs that's casting from the coat, and then draw on the shoes. And maybe this guy has like a mustache or something. You know, he's an older gentleman. Okay, and then we got more boxes here. Simple, boom. Easiest box rendering I've ever done in my life. More cylinders. Some more mechanical stuff here. The wing, the underside of the wing here. It's gonna be dark. And then maybe the inside here of this craft is also dark. And just a cast shadow. Now we're starting to get into the actual the design of this thing, of this aircraft. So I know that there's this side, this form that's basically cutting across, right? There's this like shape that's cutting across here, but I don't want to cover the stairs. So as I paint it, I'm painting it on a separate layer, and I'm just going to reveal back the stairs. So I want to make sure that it's relatively clean. And then the wings here are going to be lit and exposed. And then the bottom half of this ship is going to be in darkness, right? Because it's being lit from the top, so we're going to have a fairly large cast shadow, or a fairly large shadow from the object, right? So we're going to have something like that. Same thing, actually, with this side of the ship. This is actually all going to be in shadow. So let's go ahead and just make that selection. And I'm actually just tracing the forms of the ship here. And I'm just gonna make a block, a big paint bucket, and then just to reveal some of the steps, because we don't want to lose that, right? Do the same with the top side of the ship. I'm thinking that it's gonna have some creases here, so that's my justification for having like a little shadow here, and then maybe just a little shadow on the window and the instruments inside of the actual plane. Might be really cool to see. And then this object here is being lit and it's going to roll, right? So I know for a fact that even this little bit is going to have a sliver of shadow here. So I'm going to mark that down as well. Okay, let's not forget the pipes and stuff, or the wires on the ground here. Maybe there's more wires way back here in the distance. And because of the nature of this object and where the light is coming from, it's actually going to be fairly dark, right? In the areas where there's no light. So since this back section here isn't going to receive any light, I'm actually going to make a selection around this, around the hanger, and all of this here is actually going to be dark. So let's just create a separate layer, and this is all going to be dark. And look how it already sells and indicates the lighting scenario, right? And we almost kind of get a sense of like, oh wow, it's actually light outside. But the main light source is actually coming from the top. So the question is, how do we sell that? How do we get the impression that this ship is actually being lit from the top? Well, since the light on this open door is also white and it's competing, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna make a decision to say, well, in order to really sell that this is actually being lit from the top, I'm actually going to say that this is all going to be in darkness. Now this is a very graphic decision, right? It's graphic in the sense that I decided to make everything dark because it's what's going to help sell and be most direct about where the light source is coming from. And look how already we're really getting the sense of this object really being top lit, right? Now, if we want to sell the idea that there's some light source, then we can say, okay, well, there's maybe some light source here. And the light source here is basically the very thing that's lighting or illuminating this object. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to darken this area. Just want to be careful about the edges here of what's the ground plane versus what's the backside of that wall. So I want things to be very, very clear and clean. We have an object there. Maybe we can just say, oh, there's more objects here and more missiles or something in the back, just to kind of set dress it a little bit more, and more pipes and wires and stuff feeding into this bit of machinery here. And we haven't even done the cast shadow yet, so that's going to add a lot to this image. So I'm adding in like little indication on the floor here, just as you know, as the ground here is not perfectly all flat. I mean, there's areas where it's been poured cement, so we're gonna have just some impression and some grooves on the ground here. So that's kind of what this is representing. And then just to have fun with this, I'm going to say that there's a ton of barrels right here in the back that are being lit, right? And that kind of gives us the impression that there's a lot of activity and stuff going on back there. There's a book by Marcus Mateo that Scott Robertson over at Design Studio Press, that was published a few years ago, and if you guys haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. It's an incredible book on composition and lighting and storytelling, and I got a lot of my influences on these types of exercises from that book. So a lot of credit goes out to Scott Robertson and Marcus Mateo for publishing that book. Very, very useful when it comes to just really dynamic compositions, and you need to just have solid understanding of light and just, you know, this type of subject matter, you know. Bit of light there. I don't know if it needs it. It's just kind of making it a little too busy, so I'm gonna just kind of erase away just a little bit of it. But you can see that just by editing out, we're able to actually make these changes fairly easily. All right, sweet. Okay, cast shadow time. Let's do that. So the cast shadow, I'm just going to create on a separate layer, just because if we mess up or we need to edit things out, then we can easily do that. So the cast shadow is going to be projected from this aircraft here. And if we were to draw it in red, you can see that it's going to be landing right around here. Okay, and I'm going to just draw out, make an educated guess of the cast shadow here, and I'm gonna paint this in red just so that you guys can see how I'm distributing the width of the shadow. And the width of the cast shadow is gonna help describe kind of how wide the ship is. Also the cast shadow on these missiles as well. Cast shadow on the character, working on this bit of the wing. And this wing, right, if I draw a line straight down, it's probably going to meet right here. So this bit of the wing is going to definitely extend way out past this guy. And I'm going to say, yeah, around here, it's probably going to end. It's going to do something like that. As that's what I'm guessing, how thick and how wide the wingspan is in the front. And obviously, this character is actually going to be casted in shadow as well. And I just want to see how much of that, how much cast shadow we can actually get away with, because you know a lot of the object here is, it can cover a lot of stuff, and so we want to be able to make the appropriate edits. I'm just going to angle this just a little bit. I think it needs a little bit of an angle to this wing. It's feeling a little flat. I'm going to do the other wing here on this side. It's probably way back here. Cast shadow from this little point. And the ladder. The character here. the general or the commander. And I'm also going to do the wingspan here as well, right? That's definitely floating over this thing. And I'm imagining that there's a cast shadow way back there as well. So the cast shadow, it gets so complex because it starts to interact with all of these objects. That's why I always save this for last. And cast shadows on the object itself, right? So we definitely don't want to forget that. I think I already indicated that there. But this is going to have a lot of cast shadows, right? Okay. I think I got most of it. And if we want, we can say, oh yeah, there's cast shadows here. And you know how we talked about there being a potential cast shadow from the structure itself, and how it's going to create just some additional shadow planes here. We can suggest that, and I'm doing that on a separate layer here on the red. But when we start to darken it, just keep in mind, you know, how much it's going to cover. So I'm going to keep that separate. The most important thing is the immediate cast shadow. So I'm going to turn this black, and we'll start to see what it covers. And it's looking pretty good. I'm actually pretty amazed at, you know, how well it still reads, you know, considering that it covered a lot of the character here. And if we want to bring it back, we can start to bring just part of the character back, and just little hints of the character working. You know, if it's too much in darkness, but I'm okay with it kind of being completely you know, in the dark. I'm just going to do some cleanup here on the drawing. So this drawing here, just to duplicate it, I'm going to use the eraser to just clean up some of the lines, because I feel that the lines are there. They were there to describe the form, but since we already have a lot of the shadow describing the form, I think we don't need some of the lines. So I'm erasing some of the lines in the cockpit area, around the wing, around the surface, around the glass, definitely around the ground plane here. Some of these lines can get a little too noisy, so I'm just kind of dialing some of that stuff back, you know, just so that it has the cleanliness in some areas, and it's also still mechanical. I'm going to get rid of some of the lines back here. And there you go. Not too bad. Not too bad. It's a fairly effective technique. Now, we have this cast shadow, right? This craziness. And I'm just going to try this out. And you guys can try this out as well. But if we have a shadow here, and you guys want to kind of make it a little bit more dramatic and have cast shadows going across, you know, try it out, put it in black, and notice how it kind of kills the image. It kills the image. So what we can do is we can actually dial down the tones here, but since we're keeping everything relatively in a two-tone, meaning just black and white, this technically doesn't really work for us because we're introducing another value here. But when we get to a point where we're doing 3 values, dark, medium, light, you can start to introduce, you know, the subtlety of lighting here just by doing stuff like this. and gradations and things like that. So that will most likely be the following step. You know, once you guys get really comfortable doing this type of sketch, that's going to be the next step. Okay. All right. So I'm going to save this out here, and just so we have that, we'll call this top light demo. Okay. Now let's do some backlighting. So the backlighting, we're going to follow some of the similar principles, but the lighting this time is actually going to come from the outside. So I'm going to put a layer underneath this, lock it, right? Lock that layer. This is going to be my working layer. And now I'm going to make a mask here. I'm going to start off with the hanger. And I'm just going to go ahead and just start masking out all of the elements that I know for a fact are going to be dark. So I'm going to start off with the hanger. I'm not going to worry about the ship just yet. Just going to go ahead and mask this out, make it nice and clean. And just cover that in darkness. Right? Now, there's a lot of complexity here. There's like you know, rails and stuff like that that we can introduce back into the scene. There are cast shadows and stuff like that that I can definitely bring back here, but for now I just want to focus on the actual ship here, because a lot of these lights may be really distracting to the scene. So I'm actually not going to worry about this just yet. We're only going to add in more detail if this needs more detail, if the scene needs more detail. So I'm going to keep this on a separate layer so we can make those edits. But now I'm going to start focusing on the actual ship. So since the light is here, and this is going to be predominantly in shadow, this is actually really easy for us. We can actually cover a lot of this in shadow here and just leave a little sliver of light. And this is the beauty of backlighting, right? Everything is so interpretive. It's all suggestive details. You know, it's basically doing a silhouette, right? That's why backlighting paintings are really fun to do, because it's actually really easy, you know, and you're only focusing on the shapes. And backlighting scenarios just makes everything look so much more cool. It just like, it has kind of this really dramatic feel to it. It's crazy because a lot of this detail here we probably won't see, you know, because it's all being backlit. So all this stuff right here, all that work that we just did on the wings, everything, it's all going to be dark. Now again, we're going to keep the character, the vehicle, and everything. We're gonna treat everything as a separate individual object, just because, you know, we don't know what the cast shadows are going to do just yet. So I'm trying to keep things relatively simple and individualized first before we get into the cast shadows. That can dramatically change, you know, how objects sit next to each other. So add that, and then add a little shadow here. And this thing, even a lot of this form right here, this like back wing, is most likely going to be in shadow. You know, we're just going to see maybe just a little sliver, but for the most part, I mean, I think that's going to be relatively dark. Gonna go around this character's head. And this wing here, we're only going to see just a little sliver of it, right? Because it's all in shadow. Everything else, the underside of it is being all backlit, so we're going to lose a lot of detail there. And this is a great exercise because sometimes, you know, when you guys are when you're doing your paintings and you think that you may think that your lighting scenario works really well, you know, but you know, by testing it out on your design, it actually might work against you, just because due to the complexity of your design, or you know, how many objects you have in there, or the orientation of the camera, it can change the outcome of how your object looks, you know. Probably have a little bit of light here coming through. Go ahead and start lighting or backlighting this little staircase, portable staircase with all this stuff. There's like a lot of mechanical stuff here that this guy's working with. I'm gonna do the characters probably in last because they're a little bit more complex, just with all the folds. And we know what's cool about, you know, backlighting all this stuff is we get a lot of opportunity to see, you know, silhouettes. So since we're playing with silhouettes, we might as well really play up, you know, the backlight aspect and put in more objects such as wires and hoses coming down. This barrel's probably going to get the same exact treatment, just backlit for the most part. It's very similar to the top lit object. And the missiles too, they're going to get just a slight sliver of light. And let's do these boxes here. So this box here, it's interesting. It's at an angle enough where it's catching light. So I'm gonna leave the opportunity of that being, you know, on the light side, just because the direction that it's facing, according to the sun, it's probably getting just a little bit of light on that side. So I'm gonna cheat it a little bit and say, yeah, it's getting a little bit of light. It's fine. Okay, let's do the characters now. So the characters are all going to be backlit, right? And we're only going to see just a sliver. Again, backpack's all dark. We're going to see the character's arm here. The backside of the character is all silhouetted. The jeans or the pants here, we're only going to see just a sliver of it, and the shoes. Same with this guy, the commander, right? Before we had a mustache and all that stuff, but now this commander is actually going to be all in shadow, at least a good portion of the face. So this is all going to be in shadow, and we're only going to see an impression of the face and just a slight expression. We probably won't even see much, to tell you the truth. And in the arms, this is probably going to be in shadow, right? The hand here is probably going to be a little bit of light. We're gonna put a little bit of shadow here on the sleeve, going down to the bottom of this character, down to the pants and the shoes. There we go. Alright. It's backlit. Sweet. Okay, so let's get the hand here. Let's just kind of show just a little bit more information. I feel bad because it's kind of like I drew all this stuff and my Asian side is kicking in. You know, everything's, I don't want it to be a waste, you know? Alright, so this pilot here. So backpack, arms. I mean, this guy is pretty much a silhouetted character. And for the most part, there's not much that this guy is going to have, you know, he's not going to have much interaction of light and dark. It's pretty much backlit, you know, just like the ship. Console, we'll have some instruments and stuff like that. I'm probably going to bring back a little bit more detail because we lost a lot of just cool stuff going on this vehicle, you know, just because of the nature of the lighting scenario. So and it's good that, you know, we're thinking about, you know, how to bring back or introduce more information, because, you know, your designs aren't always going to look pretty at every angle. So this is just a good way to kind of test our designs. Now I'm actually going to knock back the lighting here just a little bit so that we can actually go back in and just see our drawing. And I'm going to go ahead and start to erase away just some of the surface here to kind of bring back some of this nice detail that we had. I'm going to make a selection here using the lasso tool, and I'm going to say, well, there might be a nice small sliver of light that we're getting. Even though it's backlit, it's not entirely eating up the surface. So I'm going to use an eraser and just going to pull some of that back. And we might get some nice lighting effect there. Same with the ladder here. We can say, oh well, you know, even though it's backlit, we can just kind of make some indication that there's a little sliver of light just hitting that, you know, because I feel like a lot of that just kind of went away. And the wing here, just gonna pull it a little bit and say that, you know, it's not fully casting a shadow over the entire thing. Okay, awesome. Now let's do the cast shadow for this guy. Let's pull it full black, and you can kind of see how everything's kind of working and how everything's reading together. Now let's do the cast shadow. I'm gonna make a layer on the ground below this and start plotting the shadow. Now the shadow, or the cast shadow for this, is going to be relatively based on the angle, right? So if we have the sun here on our notes, it's going to be based on that angle. So a lot of the shadows that are coming from the sun here, you know, we can say that the tip of this, the nose here, is going to be way over here, right? Because it's being backlit. So we're going to get this huge shadow, this cast shadow from this object that's going to be way in front of the camera. And it's probably going to be covering a lot of this stuff here. it's most likely going to be covering this box here and all this stuff. This box is going to have its own cast shadow. And it just makes for just a really interesting and dynamic, you know, shadow that's going to act as a really big compositional tool for this frame. Even this little tool is going to cast a shadow. And even these little barrels, they're going to cast a fairly long shadow too. And even the hanger itself is going to cast a shadow. So we can get this nice break here. I think I missed a bit of the other side of the hanger here. I believe that's casting a shadow all across the ground. So with that said, let's go ahead and cover this up. It's all going to be, the red is all going to be in shadow here. It's all going to be dark. Look at the wings here. Let's get rid of some of these lines. These little notes here. And then the top of this thing, I know I said I'm going to cast a shadow, but maybe we just see a slight sliver of light here, just so it's not completely engulfed in shadow. And maybe there's a slight sliver of light here as well, that it's peeking over. Well, actually, yeah. It most likely actually will be covering this thing. Let's just cover it. Sorry, box. Tried to salvage the box, but it's not going to happen. Alright. Okay, so this is my favorite part, where we get to convert the red into black. Because all of a sudden, if it works, it just starts to look awesome. It's kind of like a magic trick. I've done this before where I thought it was going to turn out cool, and I turn it black, and it looks like like a complete mess. So I'm hoping that this will work. Alright, there we go, backlit. Look at that complexity. That shadow is so crazy. Jeez, I would not been able to figure that out. I mean, that's a lot of shadow information. Now remember how we talked about the hanger here, getting a little bit more information? And I think this is a good opportunity to bring in maybe just a tad bit of light information, just because it's an opportunity for us to say, hey, there's light that's seeping through, but it's not entirely in darkness. Maybe there's like a nice shadow here, a light casting at an angle, and there's like some tools and stuff catching a little bit of light. And even this section too, even though it's backlit, I mean, we're gonna get little slivers of light definitely hitting here. And since this is being backlit, I want to make sure that the elements here look cool and mechanical enough, so it's not just some random opening here. Alright, let's turn that black. Boom! Sweet! That's actually looking pretty decent, and it has kind of the nice cinematic vibe that I was hoping for. Because again, backlit objects look cool, right? Just kind of has this like really, you know, dramatic vibe and feel to it. Again, I'm going to just duplicate this, keep this as a separate drawing, but I'm just going to erase away some of the line drawings, anything that we don't need, because it can get a little too sketchy. So these are some of the things that I just want to erase away, like some of the extra little doodles and lines here that just create unnecessary amount of noise. Since the sketch was fairly loose to begin with, just want to make sure that that a lot of this stuff it's pretty clear and clean. Alright, done and done. Now we have our backlit demo, so let's check it out. Let's do the comparison. So we have a backlit and we have our top lit. That concludes the demo for the basics of lighting. I hope you guys enjoyed. Feel free to comment, and I'll see you guys next time.